Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're shifting gears a bit. We're moving past that initial moment of crisis in addiction recovery.
Yeah, moving into what happens after you put the drink down or stop the primary drug.
Exactly. Because for so many people, that's not the end of the story, is it? It's really just the starting line for something. Well, something much bigger and often quite surprising.
It really is. A whole new set of challenges can emerge.
And that's what we're diving into today. This really complex challenge of cross-addiction. Where you stop one compulsive behavior, maybe alcohol, and then almost immediately or sometimes gradually just pick up another one.
Like food or gambling or maybe working yourself into the ground. Even control itself can become the addiction.
That insidious need for control, yeah. It's a huge one.
It really is. And this whole phenomenon, this transfer, is maybe one of the most profound challenges people face in long-term recovery.
Why profound? Because it forces a tough realization.
Exactly. It makes you realize the problem wasn't just the bottle or the substance. It wasn't really external at all.
Ah, okay. It was internal. Something disordered in how we were, dealing with life itself.
Precisely. So when someone manages to get physically sober, but they haven't tackled those underlying issues, those root causes,
Then they're vulnerable.
they often fall into what some of the recovery literature calls the dry drunk syndrome.
Dry drunk. That's such a stark phrase. What does the literature actually mean by that? It sounds unpleasant.
It is unpleasant. It refers to people who are dry by endurance and are unhappy people, as one source puts it, quite bluntly.
So they're just toughing it out, white-knuckling sobriety.
Pretty much. They're enduring life without their old coping mechanism, their old relief valve, but there hasn't been that fundamental internal shift. No real change in personality or outlook.
And they feel stuck.
Stuck, and often resentful. Crucially, they might operate under this mistaken belief that just because they stop the substance, the universe somehow owes them.
Right, like, I did the hard part. Now where's my perfect life?
Exactly that. They're waiting for their world to improve, maybe thinking, as though they are owed a favor for having made the supreme sacrifice.
Wow, that's a really dangerous place to be mentally, isn't it?
Yeah.
Holding up a sort of cosmic ledger sheet, waiting for payment.
It's incredibly dangerous because that resentment, that expectation, it just brews. And it becomes really fertile ground for a new addiction to take root.
Because the original impulse, the thing driving the addiction in the first place,
Which is often about seeking relief or comfort or control.
that hasn't actually been dealt with. It hasn't been neutralized. It's just been diverted.
Precisely. The engine of addiction just switches fuels. It's still running, just on something else.
You see descriptions of this transfer in people's stories, right?
Oh, absolutely. Very stark descriptions sometimes. One source talks about this shifting compulsion, consuming alcohol and pot and food and cigarettes and men and work until I hurt.
Notice how seamlessly that list flows.
It does, from substances to food to behaviors, even to relationships.
Because the underlying goal is the same.
It is. It's about finding immediate, even if temporary, relief from some kind of internal suffering or trying desperately to fill this void inside.
So the lesson here seems really clear, and this feels like our mission for this deep dive.
Which is?
We have to address the root causes, the reasons behind that internal suffering, that void.
Otherwise, you're just swapping seats on the Titanic.
Right. If we just get rid of the wine, say, but all that internal chaos, that lack of emotional regulation, if that's all still there,
Then you're almost forced, in a way, to replace that crappy coping mechanism like the wine with another one.
like shopping or obsessive exercise or, work.
And that's the critical point we need to explore today. So our mission really is twofold.
Okay.
First, we need to understand why. Why does this transfer happen? What's going on neurologically, psychologically, spiritually?
Unpack the why. Got it.
And second, we need to show how genuine, lasting recovery isn't just about stopping the substance. It requires applying these spiritual principles like rigorous honesty, continuous self-inventory, not just to the drinking or drug use,
But to everything.
to all areas of life. It's about transforming your entire way of being in the world.
Okay, let's start digging into that why. To really get why this habit transfers, sometimes so easily, we need to understand the physical side first, right? This isn't just a bad habit we're talking about.
No, not at all. Addiction is fundamentally a neurological condition. The brain and body have learned a very specific and ultimately very damaging lesson.
So how does that work neurologically?
Well, when you repeatedly introduce something like alcohol or drugs, these substances essentially hijack the brain's natural pleasure and reward circuitry.
The dopamine system.
Primarily, yes. The body always tries to maintain balance, homeostasis. But the addictive substance floods the system with dopamine, often called the learning molecule, at levels way beyond what natural rewards, like, say, eating a good meal or connecting with someone, could ever provide.
So the brain basically thinks, whoa, this is important, pay attention.
Exactly. It registers this intense pleasure, this intense relief as critical survival information. It's essentially screaming, this is vital, do this again.
And the brain learns from strong feelings.
Absolutely. Desire, relief, even threat, these shape our neural pathways. So when you repeat these intensely desired experiences, you carve these deep pathways. The behavior becomes almost automatic, unconscious, done without question, as one source puts it.
Okay, that explains the primary addiction. But how does that lead to the transfer when the substance is removed?
Right, here's the key bit for cross-addiction. Tolerance and adaptation. To cope with this constant artificial overstimulation, the brain tries to protect itself. It develops what are called compensatory adaptations.
Compensatory adaptations, meaning it tries to turn down the volume on its own system.
You got it. It reduces the sensitivity of its dopamine receptors, sometimes even reduces the number of them. It's trying to get back to baseline.
But then what happens when you suddenly stop the drug or the alcohol?
Well, now those adapted circuits are left high and dry. They're profoundly depleted, underactive. The person often experiences this flat, empty, uncomfortable internal state anhedonia, the inability to feel pleasure.
And the brain remembers.
The brain remembers that the fastest, easiest way it knew to get relief, to feel something, was the addiction. So it starts desperately seeking a replacement to satisfy that now physically altered system.
So there's a real physical drive for something else.
Yes, it creates a physiological imperative, as one text describes it, a genuine physical and psychological demand for something, anything, to regulate that pain, that emptiness, that discomfort. The system is physically wired now to demand quick fixes.
Okay, so the body is essentially demanding a fix, maybe not necessarily the original one, just a fix to feel normal or even just functional because the whole nervous system has been changed.
That's a great summary. It's been altered to accommodate the addiction.
But if we follow that logic, then the core issue isn't really the substance itself, is it? It's the underlying compulsion, that desperate grab for regulation, for escape, for control.
And this is where we bridge from the neurological to the psychological and, well, the spiritual dimension. Because addiction, whatever its target, alcohol, work, food, control, it seems deeply linked to this demand for domination.
Domination.
Yeah, a demand for absolute rationalization and control. The addictive impulse often includes this desire to be the ultimate controller of one's own feelings, the environment, other people, the whole narrative of life.
And that quest for absolute control. The sources say it's inherently insatiable, right? You can never actually achieve it.
Never. It's a doomed search. And because it's insatiable, it leads to this ever emptier craving for more and again. More control, more relief, more stuff.
There's a terrible irony there.
Crushing irony. The person thinks they're controlling their state by drinking or working obsessively or managing everyone around them.
But that very impulse, that drive for domination, is what ends up controlling them.
Precisely. And you see this developmentally, too. Addiction often isn't really about the specific substance or behavior, the wine, the shopping, the sugar. It's more about these deeper underlying issues.
Like what?
Things like unhealed traumas, maybe feeling fundamentally unsafe in the world from a young age, or perhaps defects in self-regulation that were learned or not learned early on.
So if the real problem is the trauma, or that feeling of being unsafe, or just not knowing how to cope with difficult emotions,
then the substance or the behavior is just the symptom. It's the mask you put on the wound, the temporary fix for the internal pain.
it makes sense then why just removing the substance isn't enough.
Exactly. If people are suffering internally, they'll naturally turn to whatever offers the quickest, most dependable escape they can find. If we take away the alcohol, but we leave the fear, the anger, the shame, the need for control completely untouched.
The addiction is almost guaranteed to just shift its focus.
It's almost certain to transfer, yeah.
I remember reading a powerful analogy about this in the source material.
Which one?
The one that likens trying to end addiction by just eliminating substances to trying to cure compulsive hand washing by just banning one brand of soap after another.
Yes. That's a brilliant analogy. It perfectly captures the issue.
Because it completely ignores the underlying compulsion, the reason for the hand washing in the first place.
Exactly. If banning the substance is just changing the soap, then what's the actual germ we need to get rid of? It's the compulsion itself. It's the internal driver.
So the transfer of addiction seems almost inevitable if that internal landscape, the self-centeredness, the fear, the dishonesty, the need for control, remains chaotic and unchanged.
It is inevitable. Because the problem isn't really external. The problem is the fundamental belief that we can control life, control our feelings, and sort of self-medicate our way out of pain or discomfort.
And without addressing that, the new addiction, even if it looks more socially acceptable, like workaholism, will eventually cause just as much damage.
Absolutely. The increasing dependence on it, whether it's work or food or anything else, it eventually overshadows any perceived benefits. It leads to the deterioration of life, relationships, well-being,
Yeah.
just like the alcohol did.
The only difference is the label.
The only difference is the label.
Okay, so given that the real problem is internal, this chaotic mind, this compulsive drive for control, the solution has to start internally too, with a pretty radical shift in how we see ourselves, right? Like an admission of defeat, almost.
Yeah, a total surrender. This initial moment is sometimes called the step before the step.
The step before the step.
Yeah, it's this crucial moment of personal concession, utter honesty with oneself. You have to be ready, finally, to concede to your innermost self that, yes, addiction is the problem, that you are alcoholic or you suffer from this profound, harmful compulsion.
But what if someone isn't ready for that label? If alcoholic or addict feels too heavy?
That's okay initially. The sources suggest that if you're not ready for the label, you must at least be willing to admit that some areas of your life are chaotic or out of control.
That sounds like a slightly easier entry point.
It can be, but it's still the moment the delusion starts to crack, the denial breaks down.
And that concession, that crack in the denial, forces you to look at the whole picture, not just the drinking or the using.
Yes, the entire self. It requires acknowledging that you have to stop trying to play God, stop trying to run the show on sheer willpower.
Because it hasn't worked.
It hasn't worked. And the literature talks about this realization involving admitting you were maybe being a phony, leading a kind of false life.
Oof. That's got to be painful. Admitting you were phony.
It's incredibly painful, but it's also incredibly necessary. Because often the addictive lifestyle, especially someone is high functioning or dealing with a behavioral addiction like workaholism,
Is built on keeping up appearances.
exactly. Grand pretenses, false fronts, constant denial. So admitting hopelessness isn't about wallowing in misery. It's about finally facing reality. It's recognizing that your best efforts, your strongest willpower, they just haven't been enough.
It's the start of real honesty.
It is the beginning of rigorous honesty, and once that huge admission is made, then the work can really begin, which leads into the serious self-inventory of step 4.
The searching and fearless moral inventory. This is where you really map out that false self against reality.
Yeah.
And the sources say this step grates on the alcoholic nature. Why does it grate so much?
Well, think about it. It grates because it's the complete opposite of the addictive survival instincts.
Which are?
Denial, secrecy, blaming others, hiding. Addiction thrives in the dark. Step 4 demands the opposite. Exposure, radical honesty, taking personal responsibility.
Looking unflinchingly at your own stuff.
Your selfish motives, your resentments, your fears. And crucially, when we're talking about cross-addiction, this inventory has to be so much broader than just listing things you did while drinking.
Right. Because the defects didn't necessarily disappear when the drinking stopped.
Not at all. They might just be expressing themselves differently. So when you're applying this to cross-addictions like food or compulsive working or controlling relationships, what kind of questions should you be asking in that inventory?
Good question. It's not just about what did I do wrong anymore.
No, it's deeper. It has to move beyond just the substance or the specific behavior and get into the underlying character defects. The inventory becomes less about blame and more about searching for truth, learning about the patterns that fuel the transfer.
So what are some key questions?
You need to ask things like, where is my life out of balance? I mean, if you've traded booze for working 80 hours a week, the answer's probably staring you in the face.
Obvious, yeah.
Then, maybe digging deeper. In what ways have I denied my true feelings or even acted against them? This gets at the self-abandonment that often necessitates finding some external replacement, some addiction.
Acting against your own feelings.
Yeah.
That's a powerful insight.
It is. And then, crucially looking forward, What patterns, what behaviors, what ways of thinking would I really rather not repeat in the future?
Ah, so it's not just about dredging up the past for the sake of it. It's diagnostic.
Exactly. It's a diagnostic tool. You're identifying the defects of character, the selfishness, the fear, the dishonesty, the need for control that are still living inside you, ready and waiting to latch on to the next compulsion if you let them.
Okay, so you do this fearless inventory. You write it all down, the resentments, fears, harms done, the defects identified. Then comes step 5.
Step 5, admitting to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs.
This act of confession, sharing it all with someone else, why is that described as so essential for sanity and peace of mind?
Because the addictive mindset, remember, thrives in isolation. Secrecy is its oxygen.
So confession breaks the isolation.
It's the ultimate countermeasure. When you carry secrets, especially shameful ones, you're trapped. Trapped in this narrative of shame and often terminal uniqueness, this feeling that nobody else could possibly understand how bad I am or what I've done.
And step 5 shatters that.
It shatters it. When you tell your story, the real story from your inventory, and you see acceptance or understanding, maybe even just quiet listening in another person's eyes, the sources say our narratives become more true having been spoken aloud to a caring listener.
There's power in speaking it.
Huge power. It's this external validation, this connection, this acceptance that breaks the dam of self-obsession and isolation. It's a profound spiritual opening.
That makes a lot of sense. The result then isn't just relief, it's connection, the beginning of real kinship.
Absolutely. The results are transformative. You gain humility, seeing yourself as you really are. You gain honesty. You gain realism about yourself. And critically, you lose that crushing isolation that defines the addict's world.
You realize you're not so unique in your struggles.
Exactly. And that newfound honesty, that humility, it prepares you for the really deep work of transformation that comes next. This whole process, the deep self-survey, facing the root defects like selfishness and fear, it's really the only way to structurally prevent the addiction from just hopping from one thing to another.
Okay, so we've done the inventory, we've shared it. Now we're moving into the phase of actually changing, right? Dealing with those character defects. Steps 6 and 7.
That's right. Willingness to have them removed and humbly asking for their removal.
But here, the sources point out something interesting about the language used in some of the early recovery literature. Words like utter defeat, devastating weakness, single-handed combat.
Yes, and that language doesn't resonate with everyone. Well, it's a crucial point for understanding how these principles can apply universally. For many people, perhaps especially women, who might have experienced lives shaped by systems of power over them, systems of domination or control, the idea that they need to be utterly defeated or focus on their weakness doesn't feel like a path to strength or healing.
Right, it might even feel re-traumatizing for some.
It could. The core goal of recovery, ultimately, is to move away from that obsession with power and control in the first place, whether it's power over a substance or power over others.
So the literature suggests maybe reframing it, a shift in understanding.
Yes, a shift from focusing on power over things to embracing something more like cooperative power.
Cooperative power, what does that look like in practice?
It means relying on a higher power, however you understand that. It means finding strength in community, in mutual support, in self-acceptance rather than self-flagellation. It's less about a brutal individual battle and more about surrendering the isolated self-will to a guiding force and to connection.
So the core transformation is realizing I can't do this alone. My best intentions, my own willpower, they keep failing me.
Exactly. And if your best intentions fail, you have to become ready, willing to try something else, to embrace God's will or the principles of the program or the support of the group.
Okay, that leads us right into step 6.
Yeah.
We're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. But that phrase, entirely ready, that sounds like a massive ask.
Yeah.
How can anyone be entirely ready to let go of something like, say, the need for control, if that feels like their core survival mechanism?
That's the beauty and, the genius of step 6. It's not actually a demand for instant perfection. You don't have to be perfect overnight.
Okay, that's a relief.
It is. It's understood more as a spiritual goal that we strive towards. It's like a measuring stick for our willingness. The only thing that's really required day by day is that we become willing to let go, just for today.
Willing to be willing, almost.
Sometimes, yes. Willing to consider that maybe this defect isn't serving you anymore. We learn that some defects might stick around for a while, but maybe they can be lessened. or their power reduced through spiritual growth and just consistent effort. The commitment is simply to willingness, not to immediate total eradication.
And the promise attached to that willingness.
The promise is profound. It's not just about grim abstinence. What's offered is happy and contented sobriety. And that happiness and contentment come precisely as these character defects, the things causing the misery, are gradually lifted.
Okay, let's take this idea of willingness and applying principles and look at where cross-addiction often crops up in recovery, especially once people get some stability back. Finances and ambition.
Oh, yes. Major hotspots for that control defect to reappear in a new disguise.
You see people who get sober, they get their careers back on track, maybe they're making good money again, but they're still terrified.
Absolutely terrified. That anxiety is a perfect example of the transferred addiction. The underlying fear, that desperate drive for security through control or accumulation, it didn't just vanish when they stopped drinking.
It just found a new playground.
Exactly. The sources mention early members finding that even when they were reestablished in business, earning well, these terrible fears often continued to haunt us. They were still trying to play God, but now it was with their bank accounts or their careers.
What were they forgetting, according to the program's principles?
Two main things, usually. First, often they forgot that their actual earning power was probably above average, making their level of anxiety about, say, ending up destitute somewhat disproportionate to reality.
Okay, a reality check was needed.
Yes. But second, and much more importantly, they forgot that the whole point of the program is to develop faith that this higher power, that God takes care, not just with the drinking, but in all parts of life.
So they compartmentalized? Sobriety was spiritual, but money was still all on them.
Precisely. Sobriety was run on spiritual principles, but the finances were still being run on pure self-will, fear, and control. And that fear then manifests as a kind of financial cross-addiction.
Like what? Compulsive spending.
Could be compulsive spending or compulsive saving and hoarding, compulsive risk-taking in investments. Or, very commonly, workaholism, using achievement and money as a shield against those deeper feelings of inadequacy or fear.
So, to really treat this cross-addiction around ambition and money, the program demands a fundamental redefinition of success itself.
It absolutely does. You have to consciously replace that old ambition, the ego-driven, self-centered desire to be at the top, to get validation, to have others think highly of you.
Replace it with what?
With true ambition. And true ambition, as defined in this context, is the deep desire to live usefully and walk humbly under the grace of God.
Live usefully and walk humbly. That's a massive shift.
It's huge. It's moving from being that lone wolf, striving for status and control, to accepting a life of service, connection, and usefulness, trusting that your needs will be met. That shift is the core antidote to the cross-addiction of work, status, and money obsession.
Okay, let's shift focus again to relationships, another minefield. Steps 8 and 9, making a list of harms done and then making amends. The purpose here is stated as extracting every bit of information about ourselves from looking at our relationships.
Yeah, our defective relationships are so often the immediate trigger for relapse or for acting out in another addiction. They cause immense pain.
But there's a nuance here too, isn't there?
Yeah.
Especially for people whose cross-addiction might be codependency or trying to control others.
A very crucial nuance. Step 8 asks us to list the harms we have done to others. Absolutely essential. But for recovery, especially from relational addiction patterns, we also have to recognize and let go of an exaggerated sense of responsibility for others.
That's fascinating. So the control issue doesn't just show up in trying to dictate what others do, but also in taking on responsibility for their feelings or outcomes.
Exactly. If your pattern was, say, trading alcohol for trying to micromanage your family's lives, step 8 definitely requires listing how your attempts at domination caused harm. But recovery also means realizing you are not responsible for their happiness or for their unfulfilled desires or for their disappointment if you make choices they don't like.
That distinction feels vital for setting healthy boundaries.
It's absolutely vital. It helps develop a realistic sense of personal responsibility, moving away from that chaotic, all-consuming sense of control or over-responsibility that fuels so much addictive behavior in relationships.
And then when we get to step 9, making the actual amends, the motive has to be right.
The motive is critical. The purpose of step 9 is restitution, making things right where possible. It is absolutely not about making ourselves look good or getting forgiveness or manipulating the other person's reaction.
We have to be willing to make the amend even if they stay angry.
Yes. We have to be willing to accept that the injured party might continue to resent us, or they might refuse the amend entirely. In those cases, the guidance is often to simply, respectfully, to leave alone. Our ego, our fear of how we'll look, our desire to control their response cannot be the driving force. It has to be a selfless act of repair where repair is possible.
Okay. This leads us to the maintenance phase, step 10, integrating all this into daily life. It's called the acid test.
It really is the ultimate test of recovery, especially against cross-addiction. Step 10 asks, basically, can we stay sober, keep our emotional balance, and live constructively under all conditions, day in, day out?
And it demands immediate action, right? No letting things fester.
Immediate action. The moment that selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear, those core ingredients of the addictive personality, the very engine of cross-addiction, the moment they crop up,
You have to jump on them.
you have to address them right away, ask for them to be removed, talk about them with a sponsor or trusted friend immediately, make amends quickly if needed. Don't let them build momentum.
So if you feel that urge, say, to start obsessively checking work emails late at night, or reach for comfort food compulsively, or snap at your partner.
That's it. That's the selfishness, the fear, the resentment manifesting. That's the signal to pause. Use the tools of step 10.
So step 10 is like this continuous self-monitoring system, the unremitting inventory they talk about.
Yeah.
It stops the internal pressure cooker from building up steam.
And exploding into relapse or into a new compulsion, absolutely. That continuous self-survey, that constant vigilance is what allows growth to continue. It deepens our understanding of humility, seeing ourselves clearly in the moment.
Because if we wait,
If we wait, if we let those defects fester, they gain power. They become strong enough to compel us back into addictive behavior, whether it's the old one or a new one. The moment you feel the resentment, the fear, the urge to stop, reflect, connect, act spiritually, that's how you prevent the transfer before it even gets started.
so if the first 9 steps kind of cleared out the wreckage of the past, and step 10 keeps us anchored in the present, doing that constant maintenance work, then steps 11 and 12 seem to offer a vision for the future, right? What life can actually look like when you apply these principles everywhere to all our affairs.
Exactly. What genuinely fills the void that the addiction left behind. Because something has to fill it.
And it can't be another addiction.
It cannot be another addiction. Genuine, deep recovery replaces that need for escape, that gnawing emptiness, with authentic, positive spiritual experiences. The replacement isn't another behavior, it's an entirely new internal state of being.
And there are accounts of this transformation in the literature.
Oh, incredible accounts. Really inspiring. One person described how real fun, genuine connection and enjoyment replaced the frantic, artificial stimulation of alcohol. And it brought outrageous joy, he said, and not just while on a spree, but from morning till night, day after day, month after month.
Wow. Outrageous joy, day after day. That sounds, well, like the opposite of a dry drunk. It suggests a complete overhaul of the inner life.
It is. It's the kind of deep fulfillment and peace that the relentless search for control, the engine of addiction, could never, ever provide.
Because you're not fighting anymore.
You're not fighting life constantly. Inner peace starts to take root. The sources talk about, for instance, replacing restless, sensuous lusts with a sublimated and ever-deepening love for people, real connection.
And replacing laziness or frantic energy with.
Replacing the luxury of laziness or the burnout of drivenness with a deep-seated calm and peace. A kind of inner quietness that remains unruffled by what goes on outside as the depths of the sea are unmoved by surface storms.
That's a beautiful image. Deep-seated calm.
It is. And that peace, that joy, that's the internal evidence. That's how you know the spiritual program is actually working to heal the underlying compulsion, not just mask it.
But this inner peace, this joy, it doesn't just magically descend upon you while you're sitting on the couch, right? Step 11, prayer and meditation. And step 12, carrying the message and practicing these principles. They emphasize action.
Absolutely. Critical point. Action is key. Prayer and meditation are vital tools for seeking connection, guidance, strength, but they won't fundamentally change us unless they are followed by and integrated with action in the world.
And that seems like the ultimate lesson against cross-addiction, because cross-addiction is often passive in a way, just falling into another pattern, waiting for things to feel better, waiting for that external reward.
Exactly. The principle is, practicing the principles in all my affairs shows me the care that God takes in all parts of my life. We have to stop treating the spiritual life like it's some separate compartment or just a theory. We have to actually live it. We have to let that higher power, those principles, into the messy reality of our work, our relationships, our finances, our everyday thoughts and actions.
So the commitment isn't just to not doing the old thing. It's a daily, active process of service, of contribution, of living differently. And that itself acts as the ultimate protection against swapping addictions.
Yes, beautifully put. The new life, the recovered life, is really built on these four pillars. Continued sobriety, yes, but also fellowship, service, and faith in action.
We have to carry that vision, that connection from step 11 into all our activities every day.
Every day, constantly checking in with that fundamental question from the 12-step guidance. How can I best serve thee, thy will, not mine, be done?
When your primary motivation genuinely shifts from what can I get out of this or how can I control this to how can I be useful, how can I serve?
That's when the engine of self-centered fear, craving, and control, the very engine driving cross-addiction, finally begins to stall out. It loses its fuel. That continuous commitment to service, humility, and ongoing self-improvement is the only truly lasting defense against just transferring the problem. #tag outro. So wrapping this up, I think the ultimate insight we can take from this deep dive into cross-addiction is that full, real recovery. It isn't just about removing a substance or stopping a specific behavior.
It's much deeper than that.
It's an existential shift, really. It requires accepting, as one source puts it, the wholeness of the limitation of one's being, letting go of the illusion of control.
Accepting our limitations, our humanity.
Yes, and abandoning that demand for absolute control, which, as we've seen, is the very engine that drives both the first addiction and then all the subsequent cross-addictions. Abandoning that in favor of humility, honesty, service, and reliance on a power greater than ourselves.
And it's that acceptance, that surrender.
That allows for a genuine spiritual awakening and ultimately makes possible the real joy of living that recovery promises. Not just enduring sobriety, but actually enjoying life.
And that transformation, as we've discussed, it has to be total, has to apply to every single corner of your life, from the big stuff like career and money down to the smallest resentment or fear that pops up during the day.
No compartments allowed.
No compartments. So maybe the final thought for everyone listening is this. If your primary addiction, let's say drinking, created chaos and misery, and you found that the 12 steps offered this clear, structured path towards sanity, order, and peace.
A path that worked when nothing else did.
Right. Then we have to ask ourselves a really challenging question. If we find ourselves resisting applying those exact same principles, honesty, inventory, willingness, amends, service, to other areas where we feel out of control or unhappy, like a relationship with food or work or how we try to manage people.
What does that resistance tell us?
Yeah, what does that resistance really tell you about your true willingness? Your willingness to genuinely stop playing God, not just with the bottle, but with life itself.
Because that stubborn impulse for self-will, for domination, for control, maybe that's the final, most subtle addiction we truly need to confront and surrender.